Both President Trump and President Biden like to boast about the prosperity that they brought to our country, but in crisscrossing America myself, I'm not seeing evidence of that prosperity. Instead, I'm seeing an America that I never thought that I'd witness. I'm seeing these giant disparities in wealth where most Americans are living on the precipice of desperation. In fact, the average income in this country is now $5,000 less than the basic cost of living, and 35% of Americans are not making enough money to pay for basic human needs. That means transportation, food, and housing. What that means is that they have to make impossible choices every day of their lives. American parents today all across our country are sitting in their living room and listening to a baby cry in the room next door and having to wonder whether that baby is $30 sick or $200 or $500 sick before they bring them to a hospital. They're choosing between medicine and food and gasoline and rent. And in order to bridge that gap between their income and their needs, Americans are increasingly relying on their credit cards. We now have the greatest credit card debt in America's history. Credit card debt is $300 billion more than when President Trump took his oath of office. And the average interest rate on that credit card debt is around 22%. When the mafia does that, they call it loan sharking. When banks do it, they just call it interest. If we're doing so well, then why is it today that 57% of Americans could not put their hands on $1,000 in order to pay for an emergency? And for the first time in American history, most Americans, in fact, 2/3 of us, believe that our children will be worse off than we are today. For most Americans, the American dream has turned into an American nightmare. And whatever graphs and data and statistics that government officials use to try to gaslight us into believing that everything is hunky-dory, reality is written across this country on the plywood that is boarding up all of these closed businesses from Main Street to Union Square in San Francisco, and it's etched on the faces of the mothers and fathers who gather weekly at their kitchen table to go through the bills and try to figure out how in the world they're going to make their ends meet. And that kitchen table math seems a lot more reliable than the sunny economic projections that we're getting from our elected officials of both political parties in the White House. Because every American family knows in its bones that these tales of a booming economy don't add up. The last two administrations, like several of the administrations that preceded them, have continued to adopt policies that favor Wall Street and tech billionaires and military contractors over the American middle class. Those interests are strip mining America of its equity, of its wealth, of its salaries, and ultimately of our democracy. And both President Trump and President Biden are now running for re-election based upon these economic choices. And what that means is that if either of them get elected, you can expect more of the same. We seem to have plenty of money for all the bank bailouts and the foreign wars, but food stamps for ordinary Americans are being cut by 90%, and teachers across the country are paying for school supplies out of their own pocket. It's time that Americans got a president who cared about their economy and not the war economy and the bank economy and the finance economy and the Wall Street economy, and not the theoretical economy on the charts and graphs. Over the coming weeks, I'll be releasing an economic plan that focuses on ending this corrupt merger between state and corporate power that has made the 6 essential expenses unaffordable for most Americans. And those essential expenses are housing, food, childcare, utility bills, commuting to work, and getting the medical care that you need to survive. I want every American to know that you are not alone in this crisis. I want you to know that I'm going to be a president who's going to be thinking about solving your economic problems every day that I'm in the White House. The government created these problems, and you deserve a government that is going to solve them.